Good morning, everybody. How are you today? It is, let's see, there we go. Now we're live on Facebook. Good morning, everybody. How are you today? It is Wednesday, April 15th. What has always been tax day, and for the first time, it is not. Today's also our middle son's birthday, and it's interesting. He always revels in that his birthday's on tax day. And so we've been talking with him about how the fact that this may be the only time in his life that his birthday is not a tax day. Good morning, Jacqueline. Good morning, Anne.
Good morning,
Thanks for
everybody.
being here with us. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning,
I
thanks.
haven't really seen you yet this morning. Happy tax day. And, well, I guess happy not tax day.
Delayed tax day.
Yes, we'll call it that. It's actually, very freeing and not so stressful for it to not be tax day.
We just postponed our stress for another day, that's all.
But it feels better to postpone it till summer.
Yep. And then officially shout out, you said that happy birthday to Ashton. So
Yes,
that's great.
because it is his birthday. Good morning, Julie. Glad you're here with us. All right, my friends, so it's Wednesday morning. We are now 4.5 weeks into COVID-19 isolation, figuring out this parenting thing. Our kids are on spring break this week, which has been, for me, the biggest stress reliever.
That they're on spring break?
That they're on spring break.
Because we're not as busy?
Because I'm not as torn between things like trying to get work done and monitoring them and keeping them on task.
So the dialectic that we had going on before between academics versus our family values, that's less...
It's less because there's no academics.
Right? Okay.
And even when we got a notification that one of our kids got a 0 out of 10 on an assignment, I was just and I asked him, I was like, you got a 0 out of 10. He's like, I know, I didn't turn that one in, remember? I was like, all right, great, we didn't turn that one in. Perfect. And it was actually, what was positive about that is that our son was so chill about it, because he's not the one that's typically chill about his assignments. He gets assigned something, he does it and turns it in.
I was a little bit less chilled about it, so
no, once you knew what the assignment was.
I understand. It's just, again, I think it's important that, that everybody realize that one parent's reaction may not be similar to another's, right? And so how do we work those things out? And so I think one of the things that I would like to chat about a little bit today is, can anybody give us in the chat box or balloons or all these other things that people do during, for Instagram, whatever else, anybody else starting to feel like this is getting a little bit old and tiring? That,
and monotonous.
This is okay, here we are again doing this. And so another day, another time that our kids are home with us, another time that our spouse is home with us, another time that I've got to just keep going to the grind. Anybody have that?
I hit a button here and I don't know how. Yeah, Jacqueline, you're feeling that way too?
All right.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it is getting monotonous, and it's not. I mean, I guess for me, with the kids being out of school, there's a little bit of a shift.
Right. I guess the idea is that, if we're aware of that, because I think that maybe some people are feeling a little bit less patient now, or just starting to get antsy, right? A little bit of cabin fever, that we start to be maybe a little bit more grumpy, a little bit less patient, right? And to have some of that mindful awareness that is happening, so that we can do some of the please skills and take care of ourselves, take care of the people that we might be, frustrated with as well, I think becomes important. And then on the flip side, so, the please skills are part of our emotion regulation so that we're not as vulnerable to our emotions, is the fact that, we're in this for now 4.5 weeks, maybe even 5. And so that's a long time. We haven't experienced something like this. And so when we look at those facts and say, oh my God, I've been sitting here in the same house with my beautiful wife here for 4.5 weeks and my beautiful kids and stuff, we can get ornery at times. And so to recognize it's just yep, the facts kind of fit. Need to be a little bit more, just sit with it that's kind of hard, right? And so a little bit of what we call the wave skill, or mindfulness of current emotion, right? And so
I thought it was funny last night when I had this realization that I think this 4.5 weeks is the longest period of time you and I have been home together, or have slept in the same bed for this many consecutive nights.
Yeah,
because we both travel so much for work, and just having that realization, I was like, we're not usually together this often, this much, let alone like all day, but even like every evening. So
and we're still talking to each other, so that's even a bonus, right? So that's great.
Yeah, well, we are, and there's still a lot of frustrations for sure. And I think so. Here, like you just said something, and I totally forgot what I was going to say. The wave skill, but also just like mindfulness, really, of what day it is, how long we've been in this. Oh, I know what it was. I was starting to think about this isolation being like running for me. Because
running's therapy, man. That's therapy
for you,
yes,
right?
I understand.
And so running is not therapy for me. Running is all about building mastery. That I remember, if you remember what we said, like building mastery is about not particularly enjoying something while you're doing the activity, but having that sense of confidence and competence when it's done. Like I like the completion of a run. I don't like the process of it. During it, I actually try to distract myself as much as possible. And years ago when I like would try to run, I've gone through multiple phases in my life of trying to run. Like still don't say I'm a runner. And I used to run, and I'd get on the treadmill, or I'd go for a run in the neighborhood, and I'd put on headphones because I always have to have music because it's a huge distractor for me while I'm running. And it used to be like, okay, if I'm going to run for 15 minutes, songs are about 3 minutes each, so I've got to run for 5 songs. And it would be like, okay, 1 song down, 4 to go. 2 songs down, 3 to go. And it actually just kind of like added to the level of misery while I was running, of just like waiting and waiting and waiting. And we think about like when you're doing mindfulness, if you're just waiting for the moment to end, you kind of miss the moment. So I had to shift in my mindset while I was running to, I'm going to be running forever. And it's just this one step, it's just this one run, and it may last forever, versus counting the songs and then just start getting lost in the songs. Again, not getting to the side where I enjoy it. I enjoy the music I listen to when I run, but getting away from when will this end? And I think that's kind of like where we are now. Like I have to get away from, the kids aren't going back to school, so that, it'll end in mid-June, or it's going to, isolation's going to end in May 5th when the governor lifts our stay-at-home, stay-healthy order. Like, we have no idea when it's going to end. So it's not 1 more day or 2 more weeks or 3 more weeks. It's just this one moment, and we're in it forever. And what do we want to do during this time?
That's so funny. I look at that differently. And so... What I look at. Good morning, Tara.
And good morning, Barbara. Great to see you.
So what I do is I don't worry about the end. So Liz wants to get to the end, right? So it's an outcome, right?
I used to want to get to the end. I know that's not effective.
Right. So, and I love the journey, right?
Just the run. Here's like running again.
I thought we were on running songs, weren't we? So I enjoy the moment as for the journey, right? And when I get to the end of my run, my journey's over. It's kind of like almost like disappointing. Like, there's no more time for me, right? And so it's kind of outcome versus performance, right? And so I want to be able to enjoy that journey. And I think that kind of comes all the way back to COVID-19. Is that I think that because we're waiting for it to be over, and we're waiting for this to be done because we're tired of this monotony. We forget to enjoy the journey, right? And so right now it seems like maybe people are counting songs, like for your analogy, right? They're waiting for the song to be done so the next song can play, so that finally all the songs are done. And instead of just like, this is kind of cool, this is different. Yeah, it has some ups and downs. It's just a matter of being there and enjoying just that moment, right? And not worried about when your run's done, when the song's done, and when COVID-19's done.
Right. So lots of mindfulness, I think, is what's happening here. Trying to really just be here now mindfully. Yes, we have to plan. Like, I'm all of a sudden starting to think about like, if the kids' summer camp gets canceled, what am I going to do with them? Maybe I need to book some more summer camps, which actually doesn't make any sense. Yep. Except that our boys go to summer camp in Wisconsin near Jim's family. And so I'm like, well, maybe I should book them all, double book everything for summer camps here in Seattle. But I'm pretty sure that if like we don't have camp in one place, we won't have it in another. But I'm starting to think like, what I got to do? I got to fill their time. And there's nothing to fill it with.
No, enjoy the moment for right now. And now we do have to plan a little bit ahead, right? So if COVID-19 does lift, or if it stays for another 6 months, who knows? And so I think that's good. Hey, good morning, Carrie. Thanks for joining us for the first time. We appreciate it. And
Yeah.
so let's talk about then what skills do we use and what strategies do we use when we have that emotional monotony? I mean, when that's there, we like in the doldrums. So what would you use?
So I think for the emotional monotony, for me, it's a balance between planning
Okay.
and totally being disorganized.
Planning and disorganized. So those seem to be pretty opposites.
Right,
to
'cause
me.
I am
So
both of those things.
I'm gonna put them up. You keep explaining to the audience as you lost me already. So.
Well, this is my problem, is that I like to have things planned out. And I like to have a schedule, except that I'm a really disorganized person. Not really disorganized. I'm a somewhat disorganized person.
I think that's a better way to do it.
Yes.
Not being judgmental.
Well, I am somewhat disorganized. You should see what this office looks like. Jim forced me to come in here and clean it the other day, and it's only a quarter of the way there. But that's a goal for our house for this time.
Well, gotta have something to do.
But like this idea of like spring break, where there were people I was talking to who are like, making schedules for every day of the week. What are they going to do with their kids, and what activities are they going to do? And that sounded really wonderful. Like, oh, we should do that. And telling my kids, like, we got to come up with something. We got to make a plan. And then in some ways, like, our brains are like little puppy dogs, and then we just go from conversation to conversation, and we never actually get the planning part done. I think that's a pretty common thing that we do. We come up with a lot of great ideas,
Yeah.
but we don't ever get them down all the time.
Or
execute them. And so, and the balance of that, I think the last 2 days have just been really enjoyable because we haven't had anything planned. Like, I've had to do some work, you've had to do some work, the kids have kind of hung out around the house. We've been playing a lot of yard games, and then kids are getting some Xbox time, which they don't get a whole lot of usually.
Okay, so then how does that? What's the planning versus being in the moment strategy or skill that we're doing?
So I think part of it is to find that middle path of not being so incredibly structured.
Okay.
Of like what has to be done every day. While getting some level of structure in, right? It is that middle path. Like, we need some structure. Like, the kids know when we have meetings, and that's the hard thing about having spring break and being home. We were supposed to go be in Florida this week, and if we were in Florida, I would have just canceled all my meetings. And being home, I didn't cancel anything. And so it's this balance between, and you didn't really cancel anything. You're still going to your classes and teaching and stuff. And so finding that way for me, is to really like, okay, remember, like, we're home at spring break.
Right.
Don't just let them play screens the whole time, but also having them have this freedom to do that. So there's got to be some level of planning and structure in our day. So like yesterday we took a 2-hour walk, which was like quasi-planned for the day to like go explore.
Yeah.
And the kids had a plan that they were going to have a contest of who could spot the most people with masks, the most number of pieces of artwork, and the most stuffies in windows, stuffed animals. And so they each had a little notepad and a pen and were tracking it. And so that was like something we planned because they wanted to go explore that. We didn't get to like where the destination was we were trying to go because it started getting too crowded where we were walking. But that piece of getting some kind of balance in our schedule between our meetings.
Yep. And again, it comes back to the running, right? So Liz had an idea of a destination to get to, walking-wise. Good morning, Tracy. Thanks for joining us. And I didn't. I wanted to just enjoy the journey. It didn't matter where we went. We could have gone in circles for all I care, right? And so, and I think that it was a good balance, right? And we recognize that in trying to go to where you wanted to go, it started to get too crowded, right? And so, and the kids even started to feel that. So if we go back to here though again, and so what we're trying to do is say that recognize that maybe you've gotten into this monotony a bit, right? That there's a bit of like, oh my gosh, when is this going to end? Type of thing. That actually does impact how you interact with your kids. If you have any kids, it impacts your own moods. It might impact how you engage with somebody else. And so,
or if you're even home by yourself, that monotony, right? Of figuring out how to do.
It'll impact yourself. Correct. And so what do you do to help get over that? What do you do to kind of add that flavor back of that spice, or to kind of get back in your stride, so to speak?
I think this is where structure, we have to start building structure and habits.
Okay.
And plan, because That's kind of like my goal right now, is to like get back into some of the structure and early morning habits that I had before COVID-19. Like, I recognize it's like a new normal. We're not trying to recreate things to be just like they used to be.
Yeah.
And adjusting to the new normal to fit back in. For me, I'd been talking with somebody about this idea of like hashtag I matter. And if you guys have been with us, you know that was like something I've been working on in the last week, of how to focus more on me during this last week, because I was getting to a point where I felt unbalanced and kind of planning and taking care of everybody else.
Right.
And having that shift of I matter. And I think that's important for all of us, for you to do with getting up and going for your runs and doing what you need to do for work. Right. And for me, doing that as well around taking care of the family, but also taking care of me. And been trying to make this shift back to getting out for walks. And if everybody in the family comes with me, that's awesome. And if not, I have to go out by myself for walks or some exercise. And structuring that into the day. Like, if I say in the schedule, like, I'm going to get up at 5:45 and I'm going to go do this thing, then I have to get up and do that. Right. To shift that. Or knowing, like we've been doing, like looking at our calendars the day before for who's got meetings when, and doing some, again, for me, I'm not trying to stay away from being overly structured, because that gets rigid, and then when things don't go, that increases my frustration and stress when they don't go as I've planned them. But having some kind of outline or shell for what the day is going to look like, of what we're going to do. Okay.
So what's our suggestion to our folks that are listening then? To provide structure, that it's not a free for all, even at spring break, that, you know, that if you provide some structure that helps you stay you, that it kind of gets you back into your groove, so to speak, you get in your stride.
Yeah. Okay. And I think I want on that structure, as we kind of talk through this, is like, what are, back to the accumulating positives and building mastery that we talked about last week, and the please skills, right? Like, it's that ABC please piece of what are things for joy you're going to do during the week.
Right. All right. That's a skill. It took a while. She was enjoying the journey this time. All right. So ABC please. That's exactly right. That's what I was saying, that we need to get to some skills that we can provide.
Yeah. So what are you going to, like, so I'm really into, like, all right, so what are we going to do to accumulate positives? I want the kids to have some experiences over this spring break that are outside the monotony of just being home. And even while I say that, I was like, oh my gosh, our kids never get to just be home. So maybe that is like the perfect spring break for them. That they get to just be home and hang out, because that's not our normal experience ever in our family because of everybody's activities. So just doing that, like, but also like getting out, like we've been talking a lot about, like, let's go play tennis. Like, tennis is a great social distancing activity because the courts are so big and they're usually fenced off by 1 or 2 courts, and we have a lot of those in the area, that maybe we'll go do something like that. So doing some kind of things that we're going to accumulate positives. Like, today's Ashton's birthday, so he has like 4 Zoom parties scheduled for him with some friends and his family, and then another family member who's got a birthday today. Yeah. And then doing that, but also like thinking about what are other activities we're going to do today. But also I've been thinking about, like, okay, what are some building mastery activities of, like, places we want to get, or tasks we want to get done around the house, from like organizing to cleaning to building things, planting things. Those are things we are really focused on. So I think that's a big part of structure. But you got to write it down. You got to make a plan, because this is where I think people fall down the most, is when we say, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to start getting up at 5:30 in the morning and I'm just going to go for a walk. Or I'm going to do, like, I can say I'm going to do that, but unless I set my alarm, think through of what's going to get in the way of me actually doing that. Yeah. And do some troubleshooting about it, it's not going to happen. Like, last week I was texting with an accountability group I'm in, and one of my friends was saying, like, oh, I really want to get up and go walk in the mornings, and I never get myself to do it. And I was like, all right, so what time do you have to get up and do it? I think she's like, I have to get up at 6. I have to go out walking at 6. I was like, so what time do you have to get out of bed by in order to do that? And she's like, or she was going to leave at 6:50, so she had to get out of bed by 6. And I was like, you're going to wake up at 6 and be out dressed and out of bed and ready to walk out the door at 6:15? She's like, absolutely. It's only if I get out of bed at 6. So then we went through like all the things that would get in the way of her getting out of bed at 6 o'clock.
So was that coping?
That's doing.
Well, it
No,
wasn't
that was more
emotional.
problem solving,
Okay.
right? More
All
problem
right.
solving.
So on that note, here's what's something that I think that is important. So I'm agreeing with you about planning, right? I think our days go by faster. We enjoy them when we've got small things that we are looking forward to, right? And so that could be me having phone calls with some of my students. It could be us having a happy hour with some people. Things that are there in our day, though, that help structure our day. I think that those, we tend to feel less monotonous, I guess. One of the things I think that you've done that I think is, and I applaud you, and I don't do this, is
I wanna hear this.
that Liz used to, and I don't know if he still does, but every morning at like 6 o'clock in the morning, she would open up her planner and she would just write the things that she's grateful for about. She wanted to write what her goal was for that day. And I think that really helped just kind of refocus and put things back onto who am I? What do I want to accomplish? Here's another day to get one step closer to the goal that I have for me, right? And so I think like Catherine even said here too, that she feels like this time has been more associated with her values, right? So she's got more time to kind of be honored of what she thinks is important to her. And I think that if we can switch our mind that way, a little bit of our turning our mind to look at how do we put a few more things in the bank that are things that we like to do. Maybe it's contributing to others by making masks. Maybe it's helping out. Maybe it's taking our kids and putting sidewalk art, chalk art on somebody else's sidewalk to say, hey, we think you're great, hang in there. I don't know, words of affirmation. And so those types of things can help us kind of pivot out of our monotony, help us get a little bit unstuck, and kind of keep us for who we are as values. I think that's kind of been important, and kind of just has hit me in this last couple of days, like, oh, we're at another week of this again. And so I'm like, okay, enjoy the journey. Don't worry about the outcome, right? And I think that we get caught as we're starting to hear, oh, everything's going to reopen and we're going to do this. I'm like, boy, that to me seems like almost like a false outcome. Is it really going to be there? If it's there, great. I'm not going to keep planning for that. I'm going to enjoy what my time I have now, try to structure things, be kinder and gentler with my kids and to you, right? And so I think that's helpful.
So you talked about, like, this is my journal. It's my Start Today journal that I use. And you're right, like, that's another one of, like, my morning routines that shifted, that I moved away from it. That was part of one of my accountabilities with my group this week, is that, like, I need to get back to filling out my daily gratitude in my Start Today journal and identifying what my 10 big goals are that I'm working towards, to have some quiet time in the morning, whether I'm reading or just being mindful and meditating, doing my planning of my day. Like, I've got to get myself back to that level of structure,
right,
so that I can be more spontaneous, quasi-spontaneous. I'm not the most spontaneous person. Quasi-spontaneous in doing some of the activities. But I've also been doing things with the kids, like Grace and I have been wanting to bake banana bread because we have these really nasty bananas going on in the kitchen.
They're very ripe. Yeah.
And it was like, all right, Grace, I need you to make me a promise. Tomorrow, you have to promise me that we are going to make banana bread tomorrow. And then we went to do that yesterday, and then we realized the butter, we forgot, somebody used our softened butter from the day before. So we had to wait another day. But that is like, okay, so now she comes and she's like, Mom, here's this thing. I promised you we were going to do this, so today we've got to make banana bread. And like, that's one of the things of my way is like telling the kids, like, remind me that we have to do this, or promise me that you'll make us do this the next day. So there's a lot of that planning and structure. And I think through the monotony of it, like you've been talking about, we need those mindfulness checks to get back to it.
I think we have to be planful. We have to be aware of that, this gets to be kind of a long process, right? So if we go back to running, which is how we started, this is not a 5K or a mile race. This is going to be a marathon. And we're a few miles in. It's time to kind of check our bodies and say, okay, how am I feeling? Anything hurting? Is my pace good? How's my breathing? Those types of things. We have to do that here with COVID-19 to say, okay, how am I doing? Do I have some of the things that are helping me stay me? How's my body feeling? Am I not getting out enough? Am I drinking enough water? I mean, just things that keep us who we are. So we have to take care of ourselves inside and out. And I think one of the things that is important, and well, getting back to your journals and so forth, is that if we make plans to do some of the things that we want, not completely, so it's completely structured, right? Is that it helps us be who we are and what we value. And if you can be that, your ability to absorb more from your kids and from your partners and from the crap of the day, we'll call it, right, gets better, right? And so I just think that it gets you back into that stride. And so I think that we like ourselves better when we can be more of a sponge and soak up things that are troubling to our kids, right? Are troubling to something that's going on. So if we can have that and wring out that sponge some other time when you take your shower after your run, then I think that it's helpful, right? We just have to keep doing it.
Yeah. So I think, and this is a good time for us to kind of do this kind of self-assessment. Do it a self-assessment for you, having your family do assessment. Like, we're 4.5 weeks. Are we living our best COVID-19 life? Right? Is the question to ask. Are we living our best life right now? In regards to accepting the reality of how we're living, right? Are we just surviving or are we thriving? And if we're not thriving in the way that we want to be, how do we want to do that? And I think this is where communication and self-validation and being real with yourself comes in as really important. And then also with your family. To kind of hold that conversation, make plans, and think through on how do we want to thrive and how do we want to live our best lives during this. And I would say for like our kids, I know the first thing they're going to say is like, more Xbox time. And we're going to have to say, is that really your best life, right? Getting them to find their wise mind on what living the best COVID-19 life would be for them. And for us thinking about that too, while noticing these like little urges, and I have this all the time, like to want to go do more. Like, can we go do this thing? That was part of our walk yesterday. It's like, I want to go look in our downtown neighborhood. A lot of the restaurants and shops are all boarded up, and they're boarded up with all this artwork with these pictures I keep seeing on social media. It's like, let's go for a walk down there, which felt like a really exciting thing to do. And where the anxiety came in yesterday is as we got closer to that part of town, there were more people out. And then, like, we eventually turned around because none of us felt comfortable in that around that many people. So we might have to do a drive-through to see some of that stuff. But to notice those urges, to kind of try to do a little bit more while trying to be really mindful, pros and cons of what's safe for us to do at this time. But also getting some planning and having these conversations on how to live our best lives. And then with your structure and scheduling, if there are things that you want to do to get out of the monotony, I think it's important that you put it in your calendar. Like, I'm going to go for a walk at 2 o'clock today. And from 2 to 3, I'm walking. And it's just an appointment you've made for yourself. Because if you don't plan it, it doesn't mean it won't happen. It can, though, just significantly decrease the likelihood that it will happen if this is not a new behavior for you and you're trying to build a new habit, new structure, new activity to get in there.
Right. The idea, though, by planning all this is that it helps you be less vulnerable to your emotions. And so by putting it into your planner or putting it into your day, right, you're going to start putting those things that you like to do into the bank, right? So that's that accumulating positives that Liz talked about. So these are things that you like to do. You can start doing that, right? So you want to plan for times of things that you like to do or plan events that you like to do, whether that's cooking, baking, going for a walk, walking the dog, whatever that is, right? Maybe it's sewing. That you start accumulating positives to keep you, right? And then the other one was building mastery. That maybe what happens is you start challenging yourself in things that you've wanted to do. Maybe it's exercising more. Maybe it's doing push-ups. Maybe it's doing more gardening, right? And so what is it that you can do for like building mastery? How can I push myself to the next small step ahead, right? Mm-hmm. And so after we keep doing that, I think that we have a better sense of ourselves. And you had mentioned, is this our best COVID self, right?
Are we living our best lives?
And I'm thinking like, I don't even know what that looks like. What is that best self? So hold on here. All right. So we don't know what that looks like at this point, right? So what I would say is that I'm going to be on the journey again, right? I don't know about the outcome. I want the journey and say, okay, is my COVID self better this week than last week, right? And so If the answer is yes, then I feel good about that. If the answer is no, then I say, okay, why not? What's going on and what's gotten in the way, right? And again, all that has to do with the mindfulness piece, though. And so I don't know what my best COVID self looks like. And so maybe by the time June rolls around, I'm going to be a much better COVID self then than I am now.
But I think that's why, this comes back to it. I think it's so important to set goals and plans. And
it's important you stay in the camera, too.
Okay, and figure out what your why is, right? And that's especially around like the building mastery things and doing things that are hard that you don't particularly enjoy is really coming back to what's your why, right? And why am I doing this? Why is this important to me? Because it's going to really be difficult to push yourself to do something hard that you might not enjoy if you don't know what's on the outside, on the end, like why you're doing it, what's your purpose. Like, I don't go running because I like running at all. Last year when I ran that marathon, my why was because I made a promise to run these miles to raise money for kids who didn't have clean water. Yep. And that was my why. Like, it was outside of myself. I wasn't doing it so I could lose weight or look better in my clothes, because that goal, I know, does not maintain and drive motivation for me at all. I've tried that for a million years and I always stop running or stop doing the thing. Okay. But when it got outside of me, it's bigger than that. So if I know like what my goal is to live my best COVID-19 life, and living that COVID-19 life fits with my goals from accumulating positives, right? Those wise mind goals, right? If I know that why, I'm going to push myself to do hard things, right? So for some of you, I want you to just think about like, what's something that's hard that I want to do? Maybe it is just getting out of the house for a walk every day, or calling someone and connecting with someone every day. Maybe like that's the hard part for you or your kids. And pushing yourself a little bit outside your box every day to do something a little bit hard. Because when you come out of this, I want you to be able to look back and say, I thrived during this time of isolation where it was monotonous, where I just wanted to crawl in bed and stay in bed. How did I thrive and how did I push myself to grow?
Well, yes, right. And part of that though is it can be hard and it can be enjoyable, right? So the two could be the same. It doesn't have to be one or the other at that point either.
Mm-hmm. And I think if what can increase the joy is if you know your why. Why am I doing this? What's the big goal I'm working toward that's going to make this effective?
We got to make that a skill. What's your why? W-Y-W. All right.
Yeah. What's your why? It is a skill. It's the skill of effectiveness.
Okay.
Right? Yeah, what do I want now versus what I want most?
And effectiveness is one of our mindfulness skills, right?
So, and to be effective, we have been going on for over 30 minutes, so we should probably let everybody go and start their day. We are so appreciative for those of you who joined us today, especially those who are here for the first time. We hope you come back. We're here Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings at 7 a.m. Pacific time. And then we've got our DBT Steps A class for students for skills for surviving and thriving during COVID-19 and beyond.
Where you learn the skills. We're a little bit more teaching. Come
there. We're on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10 a.m. I think tomorrow we'll be on Facebook. We're making a push, I think, to possibly go back to Zoom with a larger platform, possibly YouTube Live. We're trying to figure out what the right platforms are for this. If you have ideas because you know something about this, please message us and tell us what you think about it. And we just appreciate you guys being here. We'll see you on Friday morning at 7 a.m. and keep trying to figure out how to live your best life during COVID-19.
Go skillfully. Have a good week.
Bye, everybody.
Care.